I tackled her and I stabbed her.
I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke.
I'm shaking.
I stabbed her in the throat.
She slapped me across the face. She began to hit me. She started beating me. I didn't like it, so I strangled her to death.
One kid killed his mother simply because she was beginning to piss him off. Another teen, who just air quote hated Mondays, took her birthday gift, fitted it with a scope, and went on a bloody rampage in the elementary school next door. If you take away anything from this video, let it be this: evil has no age. And all of these kids have one thing in common: they were given life sentences. First, we go to a Waukesha County Circuit Court where Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier were being charged with attempted first-degree intentional homicide and attempted second-degree homicide. In 2014, a chilling crime shocked the small town of Waukesha, Wisconsin. Two 12-year-old girls, Morgan Geyser and Anissa Weier, lured their classmate Peyton Leutner into the woods and stabbed her 19 times. Their motive? To appease the fictional horror character, Slender Man. In court, Anissa described their plan.
Morgan and I decided that we would make an attempt to fulfill the plan at the park.
Morgan Geyser, now 15, appeared in court in 2017. As Judge Michael Boren asked her to recount the events of that day, she broke down in tears. With trembling hands and tear-filled eyes, Morgan described how she tackled and stabbed her friend repeatedly.
So I tackled her and I stabbed her.
She recounted, her voice breaking. When asked how many times, she replied, 19. Investigators revealed that after the brutal attack, Geyser and Weier left Peyton bleeding in the woods. Miraculously, Peyton survived by crawling to a nearby road, where a passing bicyclist found her. The court proceedings revealed the depth of the girls' delusions. They believed they had to kill Peyton to become Slender Man's proxies and protect their families from him. Slender Man, a character born from an online horror story, had taken hold of their young minds in a terrifying way. Slender Man emerged from an online post in 2009, portrayed as a mysterious being. Enthusiasts began editing his image into everyday scenes, often showing children at play. Typically, Slender Man is depicted as a tall, spidery figure in a black suit with a featureless white face. He is seen by his followers as either an evil force or an avenging angel. Morgan Geyser's attorneys have argued in court that she suffers from schizophrenia and a psychotic spectrum disorder, conditions that make her susceptible to delusions and paranoid beliefs. A psychiatrist testified that Geyser believed she could communicate telepathically with Slender Man and claimed to see and hear other fictional characters. She also believed she possessed Vulcan mind control. During her plea hearing, Morgan Geyser pleaded guilty to attempted first-degree intentional homicide but was spared prison time. Instead, she will remain in a mental hospital as part of her plea deal. Her co-defendant, Anissa Weier, also admitted her role and is set to serve at least 3 years in a mental institution. Peyton Leutner's family issued a statement expressing their relief that the case did not go to trial. They referred to Peyton as a heroic survivor, emphasizing that she is no longer a victim. If you thought 2 kids killing their friend because of a fictional character is the worst thing you will ever hear, well, you'd be wrong, as there are things even more evil. Our next kid went on a shooting spree just because she hated Mondays. We are at Santa Ana Superior Court, where Brenda Spencer is charged as an adult and pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and assault with a deadly weapon for the 1989 Cleveland Elementary School shooting in San Diego, California. On January 29, 1979, 16-year-old Brenda Spencer, armed with the rifle and scope her father had given her for Christmas, began shooting at students heading to the elementary school directly across the street from her home on Lake Atlin Avenue. Among her victims was Principal Burton Ragg, who was fatally shot while trying to protect the children. Spencer fired a total of 36 rounds, hitting 11 people, 8 children and 3 adults. Tragically, Principal Ragg and custodian Mike Suchar lost their lives, while the others, including San Diego police officer Robert Robb, survived their injuries. The shooting lasted about 20 minutes, during which Spencer infamously told a reporter over the phone that she was shooting because "I just don't like Mondays. I did this because it's a way to cheer up the day." This flippant remark later inspired the hit single "I Don't Don't Like Mondays by the Irish rock band the Boomtown Rats. Spencer's former defense attorney described her as a troubled teenager from a broken home, suffering from an abusive father, drug use, and deep-seated hostility toward authorities and society in general. The standoff with SWAT lasted more than 6 hours, during which officers discovered around 200 rounds of unspent ammunition in her house. The courtroom was packed, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation and the weight of the 2 lives lost and the others injured irrevocably altered. The rifle, the spent cartridges, the eyewitness accounts, and Spencer's own incriminating words during the siege. The prosecution argued that the act was one of deliberate intent, a calculated decision to cause harm and chaos. As the trial progressed, the prosecution dismantled the defense's arguments, emphasizing the severity of the crime and the need for justice for the victims and their families. They argued that regardless of her age or mental health, Spencer knew right from wrong and chose to commit an atrocity. The defense, meanwhile, continued to emphasize Spencer's troubled past, her lack of intent to kill, and her need for psychiatric help. They argued that life in prison would be an unjust sentence for a girl who had been let down by the very adults who were supposed to protect her. To convict Spencer and potentially sentence her to life without the possibility of parole or to consider the possibility of rehabilitation. The public was divided on what justice should look like for Brenda Spencer.
As to counts 1 and 2, the sentence is 25 years to life.
She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Spencer showed very little reaction to her sentencing, but in subsequent interviews, she did say she was blacked out throughout the shooting.
I can't sit there and tell you, well, at this time I did this and at this time. You know, it's just little bits and pieces that have come back over the years.
While Spencer blamed the killing on drugs and alcohol, our next case involves a child who became tired of his mother hitting him and decided to just end her permanently.
She slapped me across the face. She began to hit me. She started beating me. I didn't like it, so I strangled her to death.
Next, we enter the Volusia Courthouse in Florida, where 17-year-old Gregory Ramos has pled guilty to first-degree murder, abuse of a dead body, and tampering with evidence in the death of his mother, Gail Clevenger. On November 2nd, 2018, 15-year-old Gregory Ramos got into an argument with his mother over his school grades. The fight escalated, leading Ramos to strangle her to death. Following the murder, the Florida teen called 2 of his friends to help him bury his mother's body and stage a robbery at their house. Ramos then called 911, claiming he had come home to find the house had been robbed and that his mother was missing, though her van was still running in the driveway.
I just got home and my house is completely trashed. It looks like someone broke in the side door.
Okay, how long have you been gone?
I've been gone all school day.
However, detectives soon noticed inconsistencies in the stories provided by Ramos and his friends. Under police interrogation, Ramos eventually confessed to the crime, revealing the shocking truth behind his mother's death. After initially denying his involvement, Gregory Ramos suddenly snapped and began to reveal the true course of events to the detectives. He recounted then,
So I got home. I got in an argument with my mom. She slapped me across the face. She began to hit me. She started beating me. I didn't like it, so I strangled her to death.
In an extremely calm manner, he continued,
I strangled her to death. I put her in a wheelbarrow. I put her in my car. I took the car. I had a mental breakdown where I was committed 3 times.
Ramos went on to describe how he dropped the wheelbarrow in some random-ass location and then drove back to the church where he began to dig a hole to dispose of his mum's decomposing body. He insisted to the detectives that his crime was an impulsive act driven by being beaten the out of. In December 2020, Ramos pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, abuse of a body, and tampering with evidence.
He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, abuse of a dead human body, tampering with physical evidence. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you do it?
Yes, Your Honor.
During the proceedings, family members came out with eulogies for his mother, but it was what his grandmother did during the proceedings that melted our hearts.
Dear God, in the name of your son Jesus, I ask you to keep his soul pure and close to you. And Father, please protect them from any bodily harm.
The following month, in January 2021, the now 17-year-old was sentenced to 45 years in prison, with the sentence set to be reviewed after 25 years due to his minor status at the time of sentencing. Despite his cold and seemingly remorseless demeanor during his initial confession, Ramos's public defender, Matthew Phillips, stated during the court proceedings he's extremely remorseful and he regrets his actions every day. Although Greg Ramos was remorseful and claimed that he did it in the moment, our next kid just wanted to kill people for the sake of it.
Why did you go to school and start shooting people?
I had to. I had no other choice. I couldn't do anything else.
Now we are in Lane County Circuit, Oregon, September 1998, where Kip Kinkle was charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder and 26 counts of aggravated attempted murder. In September 1998, Kip Kinkle confessed to the brutal murders of his parents on May 20th, 1998. The following day, he walked into the Thurston High School cafeteria and opened fire with a semi-automatic rifle, discharging 50 rounds. The attack resulted in the deaths of 2 students, Ben Walker, 16, and Michael Nicholson, 17, and left 25 others wounded. Kinkle faced charges for 4 counts of aggravated murder and 26 counts of aggravated attempted murder, which included the wounded students and his subsequent assault on a police detective. During the subsequent interrogation, Kip Kinkle sobbed and said he had no other choice.
Why did you go to school and start shooting people?
I had to. I had no other choice. I couldn't do anything else.
In November 1999, Kip Kinkle faced a 6-day sentencing hearing that would determine his fate for the horrific acts he committed in May 1998. The hearing, held in Lane County Circuit Court, was presided over by Judge Jack Mattison and provided a comprehensive examination of Kinkle's crimes, mental health, and the profound impact on the victims and their families. During the proceedings, investigators and eyewitnesses recounted the chilling details of Kinkle's rampage. The courtroom also heard debates about Kinkle's mental health. Defense attorneys argued that Kinkle, who was 15 at the time of the shootings, suffered from severe mental illness. They presented expert testimony suggesting that his actions were driven by psychosis and paranoia, conditions that should be considered in his sentencing. However, the prosecution countered with a clear portrayal of the calculated nature of Kinkle's crimes. They emphasized the premeditation involved in both the murders of his parents and the school shooting, arguing that Kinkle's mental state did not absolve him of responsibility for his actions. The hearing also provided a platform for the victims and their families to share their anguish and grief. Heart-wrenching statements described the pain and loss they had endured, highlighting the profound and lasting impact of Kinkle's violence on the community. When the time came for Judge Mattison to deliver the sentence, the courtroom was tense. Kinkle was sentenced to more than 111 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence reflected the gravity of his crimes and the judge's determination that Kinkle should never be released back into society. Kinkle's reaction to his life sentence was one of visible distress. Throughout the hearing, he had remained mostly silent, occasionally showing signs of emotional strain. As the sentence was read, he appeared to break down, sobbing openly in the courtroom. Our next kid could not tell the difference between real life and fiction. So, in trying to mimic what he saw in WWE, he killed a girl he was supposed to be babysitting. We are in Broward County Circuit Court, where Lionel Tate was being charged with first-degree murder of Tiffany Eunick. Lionel Tate was just 12 years old when he committed a crime that would shock the nation. On July 28, 1999, Tate brutally beat 6-year-old Tiffany Eunick to death in his home in Broward County, Florida. Tate, who was being babysat by Eunick's mother, claimed that he was imitating professional wrestling moves when the fatal incident occurred. However, the severity of Tiffany's injuries told a different story. The medical examiner reported that she suffered a fractured skull, lacerated liver, and multiple other injuries, indicating a level of force inconsistent with play. In 2001, at the age of 14, Lionel Tate was tried as an adult for first-degree murder. His court appearance drew widespread media attention, not only because of the brutality of the crime, but also due to his young age. In the courtroom, Tate appeared small and vulnerable, a stark contrast to the gravity of the charges he faced. He sat quietly, often looking down, as legal arguments and testimonies unfolded around him. Despite the defense's argument that Tate did not intend to kill Eunick and that the incident was a tragic accident, the jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. On March 9, 2001, Lionel Tate was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, making him the youngest person in modern U.S. history to receive such a sentence.
In Florida, a first-degree murder conviction carries a mandatory life sentence. Incarceration via natural life.
Tate's reaction to his sentencing was a mixture of shock and disbelief. As Judge Joel Lazarus handed down the life sentence, Tate broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. His mother, who was present in the courtroom, also wept openly. The harsh reality of spending the rest of his life in prison hit Tate hard, and his emotional breakdown highlighted the tragic intersection of childhood innocence and the severe consequences of his actions. The sentence sparked a national debate about the appropriateness of trying and sentencing children as adults. Many argued that Tate, given his age and the circumstances of the crime, should have been treated within the juvenile justice system. In 2004, an appeals court overturned his sentence on the grounds that his mental competency had not been properly evaluated before the trial. As a result, Tate was released under a plea deal that included 1 year of house arrest and 10 years of probation. Tate's case remains a perfect example of how hard juvenile justice can be. While Lionel killed the child he was babysitting, our next kid killed the person who was basically babysitting him at school, his teacher.
And I just didn't want to seem like a coward or a wuss by backing out at the last moment.
Tense and somber day at the Jefferson County Courthouse in Fairfield, Iowa, Willard Miller faced the culmination of his actions as a judge handed down his life sentence. The sentencing hearing, which lasted over 7 hours, was the final chapter in the tragic case of Nohema Graber, a 66-year-old teacher brutally beaten to death while taking her regular afternoon walk in a park. Miller and his co-defendant, Jeremy Goodale, had pleaded guilty to the 2021 murder. The courtroom was filled with a heavy silence as Judge Sean Showers addressed Miller.
However, I will not gloss over the fact that you and Mr. Goodale cut Nohema Graber's precious life short.
As part of a plea agreement, prosecutors recommended a prison term ranging from 30 years to life, with the possibility of parole. Miller, visibly emotional, addressed the court before his sentencing.
I would like to apologize for my actions, first and foremost, to the family. I'm sincerely sorry for the distress that I've caused you and the devastation I've caused your family.
Miller's and Goodale's crime had been particularly evil. On November 2, 2021, motivated by anger over a bad grade Graber had given Miller, the two teens, then 16 years old, planned and executed the brutal murder in Chautauqua Park. The hearing provided graphic details of the crime. Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation agent Trent Valletta described finding Graber's body hidden under a tarp with a wheelbarrow and a railroad tie placed on top to obscure it. Only a shoe and a hand were visible, pointing to the calculated effort to conceal the crime. The prosecution presented a chilling narrative of the events leading up to and following the murder. Social media messages between Miller and Goodale revealed their discussions about the crime, including motives, planning, and attempts to cover it up. Recordings of police interviews played during the hearing showed Miller initially denying involvement, but eventually admitting to being present and helping to hide Graber's body. However, he stopped short of admitting to the actual killing. Goodale's testimony earlier in the proceedings had implicated both boys in striking the fatal blows, although Miller claimed he did not physically attack Graber. Despite this, their detailed planning and shared responsibility for the crime were clear.
And I just didn't want to seem like a coward or a wuss by backing out at the last moment.
As the sentencing hearing concluded, the weight of Miller's actions seemed to crash down on him. His tearful apology and visible distress reflected a stark realization of the consequences of his crime. Miller was sentenced to life in prison at the age of 17 with the possibility of parole, a sentence that would be reviewed after 30 years due to his age at the time of the offense. Our next kid tried to fool everyone in court, but one thing he forgot was that even the walls have ears.
I didn't mean to hurt him. And so you know I loved Austin.
We are the New York State Supreme Court, where Dylan Shoemaker was being charged with the second-degree murder of his girlfriend's toddler son. The incident occurred in Springville, New York in 2013, when Shoemaker was left to babysit the child. According to reports, Shoemaker repeatedly struck the child, causing fatal injuries. During the sentencing, Shoemaker displayed significant emotional distress. His reaction included tearfully pleading and apologizing to the victim's family, expressing deep regret and sorrow for his actions.
I didn't mean to hurt him. And so you know I loved Austin.
Despite his visible remorse, the judge handed down the life sentence, emphasizing the gravity of the crime and the need for justice for the young victim. One particularly controversial aspect of Shoemaker's case was a recorded conversation where he told his mother that he believed he could avoid a harsh sentence if he cried in front of the judge.
In a phone call to your mother from the holding center, you stated, and I got a quote from the court reporter, "I am a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry in front of the jury, and they're going to feel sorry for me."
This statement, captured on a jailhouse phone call, was played in court and likely influenced the judge's perception of Shoemaker's sincerity. The judge might have viewed his emotional display as a manipulative tactic rather than a genuine expression of remorse, impacting the severity of the sentence. He was sentenced to 25 years to life.
I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a joke. I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body.
In 2006, Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk were arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder for the killing of Cassie Jo Stoddart. Draper was 16 years old at the time of the murder. Although they were young, they were tried as adults and convicted in separate trials in 2007. Brian appears in Bannock County, Idaho court system to hear his sentence. Brian Lee Draper, along with his friend Tori Michael Adamczyk, was convicted for the brutal murder of their classmate Cassie Jo Stoddart in 2006. Draper, then 16 years old, and Adamczyk, 17, meticulously planned and carried out the murder, which shocked their community in Pocatello, Idaho. Brian said the following words about his killer: "Had I not met Tori, this never would have happened." When Draper received his life sentence without the possibility of parole, his reaction was a mix of shock, disbelief, and perhaps resignation. Reports suggest that Draper remained relatively composed during the sentencing hearing, but his demeanor likely belied a tumult of emotions raging within him. Draper's involvement in the meticulously planned murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart revealed a disturbing aspect of his character and mindset at the time. The meticulous planning, the lack of empathy, and the cold execution of their plan painted a picture of a troubled and dangerous individual. The life sentence without parole would have undoubtedly been a sobering moment for Draper, as it signified the irrevocable loss of his freedom for the remainder of his life. Unlike a fixed-term sentence, a life sentence without parole offers no hope of release, leaving Draper to confront the harsh reality of spending the rest of his days behind bars. Draper's reaction to his sentence was a mixture of remorse for his actions, regret for the irreversible consequences, and perhaps a sense of resignation to the reality of his fate. The gravity of his crime and the severity of the punishment would have forced him to confront the enormity of what he had done and the life he had forfeited through his actions. Our next kid was so infatuated with killing that it was a wonder she hadn't killed earlier. We are at the Cole County Circuit Court in Missouri, where Alyssa Bustamante pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action on January 10, 2012. In January, Alyssa Bustamante, 18, admitted to second-degree murder and armed criminal action relating to the October 2009 killing of Elizabeth Alton in St. Martins, a rural town near Jefferson City. Originally facing a first-degree murder charge, Bustamante opted for the lesser charges to avoid trial and the prospect of life imprisonment without parole. At 15, Bustamante confessed to strangling Elizabeth, stabbing her repeatedly and cutting her throat. She guided authorities to Elizabeth's makeshift grave, hidden beneath leaves in the nearby woods. Before sentencing, Bustamante addressed Elizabeth's family, expressing profound remorse and a wish to undo the tragedy. In court for sentencing, Bustamante offered her apology to Alton family, saying, "If I could give my life to bring her back, I would. I am sorry." Bustamante's lawyers said her depression, suicide attempts, and taking Prozac made her more likely to act violently. Prosecutors, however, portrayed her as a remorseless thrill-seeker, pointing out premeditated actions such as digging graves beforehand and manipulating her younger sister to lure Elizabeth outside on the fateful night. Missouri State Highway Patrol Sergeant David Rice recounted in court how the teenager expressed a chilling curiosity about the sensation of taking a life. The trials ended after days of testimony in a modest courtroom in Missouri's capital. Tensions reached a peak as prosecutor Mark Richardson passionately advocated for a life sentence for Bustamante, describing the motive behind the crime as senseless. During Richardson's plea, Bustamante's grandparents abruptly left the courtroom, prompting a rare display of emotion from the defendant, who had remained stoic throughout the proceedings.
And when the investigator starts to read Alyssa's diary, the words jump off the page for all the wrong reasons.
The sentencing hearing was emotionally charged, with repeated references to Bustamante's diary entries describing the murder as pretty enjoyable. Her brother's testimony, however, was the smoking gun.
Exactly what did she tell you?
In an attempt to mitigate the severity of the sentence, Bustamante's defense highlighted her troubled upbringing, citing a history of family dysfunction, mental health issues, and a prior suicide attempt. Mental health experts testified to Bustamante's psychological struggles, including major depression, borderline personality disorder, and early signs of bipolar disorder. The defense also suggested a link between Bustamante's use of Prozac and the escalation of her violent behavior, a claim refuted by prosecution experts. Details of the crime emerged during the hearing, revealing premeditated actions such as digging graves in advance and manipulating her younger sister to lure the victim outside. Bustamante's diary entry, graphically describing the murder and her subsequent emotions, was presented as evidence, further emphasizing the brutality of the crime. Elizabeth's mother, Patty Price, said she hated Bustamante for killing her daughter. Law enforcement officials testified to Bustamante's attempts to mislead investigators and the community following the murder, adding layers of deception to an already disturbing case. The sentencing hearing provided insight into Bustamante's troubled psyche and the heinous nature of her crime, leaving a community grappling with shock and sorrow in its wake. She was in the end sentenced to life. That brings us to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.